everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I am going to be talking to you about the exposure triangle. This video is for beginners who are trying to figure things out and just understand why photos coming out too dark, why the photos coming out too light, why I can't get that background to be out of focus. What is going on? Well, this video is for you. I am going to be showing you my Nikon D3400, which is my personal camera. But if you're a beginner and you've been wondering how to get your pictures to look like you want them to, today we're going to be diving into how to get that, all by understanding the exposure triangle. So you may be saying, what is the exposure triangle? The exposure triangle consists of three components that help your camera to work better. Those three components are the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. These three components determine the brightness and the quality of your images. So let's just break them down real quick. So the first one we're going to talk about is ISO. So ISO is the camera sensitivity to light. When you're trying to determine what setting to use for your ISO setting, it's best to use the lowest setting that your camera will allow, especially if you have pretty decent lighting. Now you don't want to bump that up too high and to a higher number, because then that will cause grain or noise in your pictures or in your videos. So you want to keep that. I like my sweet spot, because I know a lot of people like to think, what is a good sweet spot? You have to play around with your camera to determine that, but I like to keep mine between 800 and below. But if you have pretty decent lighting, 100 to 200 will definitely be good for you. Now, if you have low light settings, then you definitely want to raise that ISO up so that the camera can accept more light into the lens. And that's what we're going to be talking about next, the lens and how it works in conjunction with ISO. So that's basically the gist of what ISO is. ISO is basically, like I said, it's just the camera sensitivity to light. So you always want to just make sure is when you first walk into a room, or even if you're shooting outside, if it's already bright with no clouds or no cloud coverage or anything like that, then you definitely want to have your ISO set at the lowest setting that you can, because you don't want to let too much light in because it's already bright enough. Now, if you do like that look, that's fine. But for the most part, a lot of people and most photographers love to just keep their ISO settings low, especially if the lighting is pretty decent. As far as aperture is the numbers that you see that starts with an F. So you may see something on your camera that says f2.8, f2.8, f6, f8, f11, something like that. That is basically your f-stop. So aperture is basically like how your eyes are. It's the lens that's in the camera. And if you look right here, I'm just going to show you how I'm going back and forth to just show you how you can see the lens opening and closing to accept more light in, or to close the lens down so that you can, get a better focus. So if you have your eyes wide open, let's just take it to like if it was your eyes. If your eyes are wide open, just like how mine are right now, everything is going to be in focus. And that's the same thing that's like aperture. Aperture is just like your eyes. So the lower the f-stop, the more focus you're going to have. That's the wider the lens. The smaller the number is the wider the lens. The larger the number is the smaller the lens. I know it's kind of backwards, but that's what it is. And I always have to remember that myself. Like I said, I'm still a work in progress, but hey, I'm just saying, you have to just get out here and play around with your camera. But back to aperture. So aperture, the higher the number, the smaller the lens. So it's going to give you a shallow depth of field. So if you're going to be taking pictures of like landscape or anything like that, and you want a wide depth of field, then you want to make sure that your lens is wide open to capture all of that. You definitely don't want to have a shallow depth of field when you're trying to show a wide landscape. Let's just say like a mountaintop. You don't want to just show just the top of the mountain. You want to show how wide, and you want to show everything that's in that scene. So you want to definitely have a wide lens open. So it's going to be a low f-stop. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about is shutter speed. So shutter speed is the number that you see that's 1 over 60, 1 over 125, 1 over 50. It's all about fractions when it comes down to that. And this is basically how quick do you want your shutter to capture your subject or your image or whatever it is that you're taking. So if you're taking pictures of if you're doing a video or you're taking pictures of someone that's just standing still, not a whole lot of movement, then you definitely want to have a slower shutter speed. But what I do want to let you know that if you want to take pictures of your kids playing or something that's going to be moving fast, let's just say a bird in mid-air just taking off, maybe a car getting ready to pull off, you definitely want to make sure that you have your shutter speed high, which is as high as you can get it, because that's going to freeze the motion, and you will be able to capture that moment without any blur. Because if you have a slow shutter speed and a car is getting ready to pull off real fast, or if you're at a sporting event and you're taking pictures of athletes moving around, running around, or what have you, if you have a slow shutter speed, then the minute that they move, you're going to have motion blur because your shutter speed wasn't fast enough to stop that movement so that you can capture exactly what it is that you want to get. So you always want to make sure anything that's going to be moving and moving fast, you want to have a higher shutter speed. But if it's just sitting still, not too much movement, then you definitely want to have a slower shutter speed. I like to put it at around 160. That's my sweet spot, but sometimes it could go a little bit lower. It all depends on what it is that you're trying to capture. So that's basically the gist of the 3 components of your camera. And like I said, I'm working with a Nikon D3400 for the most part, but this goes for any camera that you have. Learn the exposure triangle, and then you'll get, the more and more you get better with understanding ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, then you will definitely get the images and the images that you're achieving, that you're trying to achieve. Now, I do want to let you know that in order for you to get to be able to control your actual camera, in order for you to be able to get to the settings to do that, you definitely need to have your camera in manual mode. Manual mode allows you full control of your camera. It doesn't choose anything for you. You actually have the creativity to change the lighting, to change, whatever it is that you want. If you don't use manual mode, then you're leaving the camera to choose for you. And that may be why you're not getting the images that you like, because it may be something that you might want to change the way the lighting is. So you might want to shut the lens down just a little bit, close it up, make that f-stop a little bit larger. Or you might want to make the picture a little bit darker. Let's just say you were outside and it's too much light and you want to just bring down that exposure just a little bit. So then you might want to go in and play around with the ISO. But because you don't have full control of the camera, because you're using the automatic setting, then this is exactly how your pictures are going to turn out. Whatever the camera gives is what it's going to give. So I suggest that you work in manual mode moving forward so that you can get to understand how the exposure triangle works. Now, granted, I know you might be saying,
well, I like to work in automatic. I just like to point and shoot.
And sometimes that will work because, it's sometimes that you may just need to snap something real quick and you don't really have time to try to adjust your settings, especially if you're still a beginner and you're still working to try to figure out how everything plays against everything. So if you're shooting in automatic, that's fine for a little bit, but try to put your camera in manual mode as much as possible. When I first started out, I was getting frustrated all the time about the same thing that some of you may be worried about. Why I can't get my pictures to look the same, the way that I want them to? Why I can't get that blurred background? Why I can't have this? Why is it looking so dark? And now that I understand the exposure triangle a little bit better, then I'm able to get the images that I want. So I suggest that, start playing around in manual mode. But I hope that this video helps some of you guys out. If it did, make sure you leave me a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that before you leave. Go grab your camera, head outside, take some good shots, and I'll see you in the next video.